Zhao Mengyou was utterly speechless. She couldn't fathom Kael's thought process. Here they were, two people who had come to rob him his enemies, and he still had the nerve to ask such a pointless question. "How dare you?" A follower behind Daihan flushed with rage. "Who are you calling a demon beast? Those low-born animals, how can they even be compared to our demon race?" Kael had an epiphany. He'd always assumed demon beasts and the demon race were one and the same. Apparently, that wasn't the case. "Enough." Daihan waved a hand. "No more talk. Business first." He fixed his eyes on Kael. "The goods." "Give me half and I'll withdraw immediately. I won't raise a finger against you. Otherwise, don't blame me for taking advantage of a wounded man." "Young Master Gu," Zhao Mengyou's tone was flat. "A stroke of fortune lies before us. Naturally, everyone has the right to contend for it. We've crossed paths before, but I won't let go so easily, and I'm not greedy same as him. I'll only take half." She paused, bit her lip, then inexplicably added, "Consider it compensation for your rudeness to me earlier." Kael nearly laughed in anger. That's not greedy. If she took half and he took half, what would be left for him? "Enough." He shook his head, slowly raising the long sword. "In the end, the sword will have the final word." Asterisk boom, asterisk. The dual pole realm erupted once more. That formidable spiritual pressure crashed down again. Though it wasn't at its peak, it was still enough to weigh heavily on both of them. Good, golden light blazed in Daihan's eyes. "In that case, don't blame me for bullying an injured man." Injured, murderous intent rose steadily in Kael's heart. "Even wounded, dealing with you lot." He stopped mid-sentence. Something was wrong. The chill that had been absent for so long had crept back over him, and it was far heavier than before. But the arrow was already knocked. It had to fly. He couldn't afford to worry about that now. "Dealing with you," he brandished the long sword, ready to strike again, "is more than enough." Wait, Daihan suddenly spotted something, his expression drastically changing. His scalp crawled with terror. Even hidden beneath his golden fur, a fine sheen of cold sweat was visible. Even Zhao Mengyou had lost her earlier composure and confidence, an unmistakable trace of dread creeping into her eyes. Daihan swallowed hard. "I think fighting a wounded man is beneath me, not the act of a true hero, so farewell." Even as the words left his mouth, his body was already retreating swiftly. "I'll take my leave. Once you've recovered, I'll fight you properly." "Leave." A cold glint flashed in Kael's eyes. "Did I say you could?" Shing. The moment the words fell, he stepped forward to give chase. He felt he needed to leave Daihan with an unforgettable psychological scar. Otherwise, the man might come back, or worse, throw in his lot with Chu Kuang and help him deal with Kael. Holy shit! Before Kael had even moved, Daihan and his followers were scared out of their wits. "You don't come any closer." Trembling crept into his voice. Kael froze. Since when had he become so terrifying? He hadn't even drawn his sword, and they were already scared into this state. "Gu," even Zhao Mengyou's words came haltingly. As a divine maiden, she was traveled and vastly experienced, yet she had never seen anything so eerie. "Young Master Gu." "You." Her face was pale, her delicate frame trembling. "There's a person behind you." "A person? What person?" Kael faltered. The words felt strangely familiar. Then he remembered back in the great Kai Imperial City, when Nero Ya had been hunting him through the streets. That was the exact same trick. And Nero Ya had fallen for it, allowing him to escape. Trying to fool me. He couldn't afford to give Daihan the slightest opening. "Dream on." "Young," one of Daihan's followers, eyes wide with terror, stammered from behind him. "Young Valley Master. I think it's the moving one I told you about." Daihan was so furious he nearly cursed aloud. At a time like this, did it even matter whether it was that one? When confronted with the unknown, every living being's first reaction is fear, and cultivators are no exception. Seeing Kael closing in, the golden fur over Daihan's body visibly stood on end. "You," he retreated faster and faster. "You're surnamed Gu, right? Today I, Daihan, was blind and offended you. The mountains remain, the rivers still flow. Holy shit, don't come closer." Shing. Seeing Kael pick up speed, Daihan abandoned all pretense and took flight in an instant, vanishing with the sky-soaring realm. "Hurry, follow him." "Young Valley Master, wait for us." The moment Daihan fled, his followers, now even more panicked, launched themselves into the sky-soaring realm and chased after him. And at that very moment, Kael's long sword sliced downward. In an instant, an unmatched blade, light a full zhang long, lanced out in pursuit of Daihan. Break! As the sword light closed in, Daihan let out a savage roar. A phantom image of a great demon materialized behind him. Its two massive hands clapped together, and by sheer physical might, it somehow took the attack head on. Asterisk pa, asterisk, a mouthful of blood sprayed into the air. Borrowing the force of the strike, Daihan's speed increased by another 3/10. And when he glanced back at Kael, there was actually something like gratitude in his eyes. Watching a few strands of golden fur drift slowly to the ground, Kael frowned deeply. The physical resilience of the demon race was beyond his expectations. That blow just now, while he hadn't put his full strength into it, would have half killed Wu Han or Kai Jun. But Dai Han, only a light wound. And what had that final look meant? Gratitude for being struck. He shook his head, setting aside his confusion, and turned his gaze to Zhao Mengyou, who stood frozen, caught between staying and fleeing. Don't worry. Sensing her terror, Kael thought for a moment and decided to offer some comfort. It won't hurt much, and besides, I'm a man who cherishes fair maidens. Terrified as they were, the female followers behind Zhao Mengyou couldn't stop themselves from blushing at those words. Young Master Gu, what brazen words were those? Brother. But before Kael could make a move, Yana Murong's roar came thundering from the distance. Behind you, behind. All the usual boldness was drained from his voice, replaced by urgency and worry. Behind Kael's heart jumped. His spiritual sense swept outward in an instant, but found nothing at all. On instinct, he turned his head and froze. Behind him, about a zhang away, a faint, transparent human silhouette floated eerily in midair, utterly motionless. It was one of the many figures he'd seen in the plaza earlier. Strange, uncanny, and somehow sinister. Though it was only an outline, Kael instinctively felt that the figure was staring straight at him. Much like Daihan before him, his scalp prickled and his heart gave a violent lurch. Despite his cultivation at the Divine Connection realm, cold sweat instantly soaked his back. On reflex, he stepped back 2 paces. But the stationary silhouette suddenly drifted forward, closing exactly the distance he had retreated, and stopped again. No more, no less. It maintained precisely 1 zhang between them. Watching this, his scalp went numb again. He nearly couldn't stop himself from striking the figure with his sword, until he remembered how his attacks had passed harmlessly through these apparitions in the plaza. He forced himself to desist. Come, come, he warned himself silently. He had seen with his own eyes the horror of that figure. Never mind himself. Even the Transcendence Realm powerhouses outside would face certain death if they so much as brushed against it. His thoughts drifted to the spirit seal on his person. The power of the Saint Realm. Perhaps it might just work. But the instant the thought came to him, a vast sense of crisis surged through his spiritual awareness, as if, whether or not the figure came to grief, the moment he produced that his own fate would be sealed beyond all doubt. Could it be that this place forbids the use of excessive force? He thought back to earlier, when he had driven Chu Kuang into a corner, and the man had never once produced his sacred weapon. Most likely, this was the same reason. Divine Maiden Zhao. He was getting rattled. Without meaning to, he edged closer to Zhao Mengyou. Why don't we? Don't come near me. Zhao Mengyou was panicking too. When she had first entered and seen these figures standing motionless, she had taken them for dead things. She had been wary, yes, but she hadn't thought much of them. Now, watching this one's behavior so clearly different from anything she had imagined, an existence she simply could not comprehend, she lost all composure. Why, young Master Gu, take care. With that, she shot skyward and fled into the distance. Her posture was stiff, robbed of its usual grace and poise. It looked less like a retreat and more like a headlong rout. Kael's face darkened. He very much wanted to slash Zhao Mengyou out of the air with a single stroke and drag her down into the muck with him. Only the fear that such an act might provoke the figure into some unpredictable change made him swallow that beautiful idea. She's gone, he said, trying to communicate with the figure. Aren't you going to chase her? No response. The figure remained perfectly still. Who are you, exactly? Nothing. What do you want? Nothing. Is there some grudge between us? Still nothing. No matter what he said, the figure would not stir. As for speaking back, that was clearly out of the question. Not talking. He had rambled on for a good while, and the figure had shown no reaction whatsoever. The fear in Kael's heart gradually drained away, replaced by a thread of irritation. Then I'm leaving too. With a shift of his body, he turned to go. But the moment he moved, the figure drifted after him, matching his step. Kael froze. The figure halted too. Silence. Now he understood. This thing had fixed its gaze on him utterly, irrevocably. Brother are you all right? In the distance, thanks to the azure condensation pill's miraculous efficacy, Yana Murong and her two companions had mostly recovered. Their spirits were still thin, but their lives were no longer in danger. Even so, fear pinned them in place. None dared approach. They could only shout from afar. Kael didn't answer. He clenched his jaw, moved, and vanished in a flicker. Brother, Yana Murong cried, where are you going? To find people. The words came out through gritted teeth. I won't be the only one dragged down by this. Inside a ruined palace, Chu Kuang, Wu Han, and Kai Jun sat together again, gloomy faces, eyes full of cold light, not a word exchanged. Their followers near, by war-matching dejection. These weren't nobodies. Even the followers, if placed in a sect like Jade Pinnacle sect, would rank as celebrated top-tier geniuses. And yet, over 20 people surrounded one man and failed. He'd broken them one by one, scattered them like startled birds, and beaten the spirit out of them. The Dao bell had rung 9 times. Was he really that strong? The question hung in every heart. This matter, Chu Kuang said at last, forcing the darkness down. His temperament was sturdier than the other two's. It was a failure of planning. We let him slip. Planning? Wu Han cut in. 20 of us against one man. What more planning did we need? Exactly. Kai Jun's face was grim. In a place like this, we can't even use Saint Realm trump cards. You're not suggesting we hunt him again? Both of you? Chu Kuang drew a long breath. If you two had held your ground then. Your meaning? Wu Han's expression twisted. Is that we're weak? Ha, Kai Jun snorted. Weren't you the one who rang 8 peals, Saint Reincarnation, and you still couldn't get the better of him? What reincarnation? Wu Han shot a look at Chu Kuang. That's body snatching. It might fool others, but not us. Being used as living targets by Kael, nearly chopped to pieces, that was their deepest shame. Now that Chu Kuang had ripped the scab off, resentment flared, and their words sharpened. Both of you, Chu Kuang suppressed the fury in his chest. If we tear at each other, when it comes to dealing with him. He stopped, sensing something. His expression shifted. Kael. The others felt it too, a fierce aura closing in fast from outside. This is too far, Wu Han thundered. We haven't even gone after him, and he dares. Halfway through his words, light blazed through the gloom, wrapped tall. Sword, light. A beam over a Zhang Long, vast and overwhelming. A scream. One of Kai Jun's followers, unlucky enough to stand in the blade's path, had no time to defend himself. He was cleaved in 2 on the spot. Damn! Too brazen. Faces livid, the crowd flashed outside. Kael stood there, sword in hand, facing them all. A faint smirk hung at the corner of his mouth. Gentlemen? Surprised. We meet again so soon. At the sight before them, hatred and fury vanished, replaced by sheer horror. What is that? It looks like one of those figures from the plaza. That thing was lifeless. Why is it here, standing beside him? They were certain, moments ago, when they'd swept out their spiritual senses, they had found only Kael. No trace of that figure at all. Cold sweat broke out across every brow. Even Chu Kuang's pupils contracted sharply, his expression darkening. Earlier, he'd assumed these figures were leftover projections of Mystic Elixir Pavilion from an age long past, warped by time, strange perhaps, but not worth serious concern. Now, clearly not. This figure gave him a feeling far more bizarre and dreadful than before. Everyone, Kael's grin widened, deeply unsettling. I've made a friend. I thought you should make his acquaintance too. The words left his mouth, and his body blurred into an afterimage, charging straight at the crowd. The instant he moved, the figure moved as well. Quick! At the sight of that figure, clinging close behind Kael, alarm screamed in Chu Kuang's heart. Get out the way! Whatever you do, don't let him. Right. With everything he had, Kael was actually a shade faster than these men, even without Sky, soaring realm, to carry him. And because the bizarre figure had rattled them, their reactions lagged half a beat. In a blink, Kael plunged straight into their midst. Asterisk, this is bad, asterisk. A follower saw Kael hurtling toward him, despair flooding his heart. No time to run now. Asterisk, fight to the death, then. Asterisk, he gritted his teeth, whipped out his profound artifact, and braced for a desperate last stand. But the sword, light he braced for, never came. Kael brushed past him as if he didn't exist. Asterisk, asterisk. Stunned, then elated. Had the man gone blind? A smile of having cheated death crept across his face, and then he collided with the figure behind Kael. His smile froze. His consciousness went out in less than half an instant. Moments ago, a living, breathing third-tier air, stepping realm cultivator, now a heap of dust. And not just him. Within a single breath, Kael's form swept past 6 men. 6 heaps of dust appeared on the field.
Quick!
Move, don't let him get close. At such an uncanny spectacle, their scalps crawled, their courage shattered. Finally snapping back to their senses, they rose into the air one after another, fleeing through the sky-soaring realm. Kael, meanwhile, felt far more excitement than fear. Asterisk incredible, asterisk. On his own, cutting down those 6 would have taken real time and skill. But just now, one breath. Effortless. For a moment, he felt as if he were walking on air. He even started to think the figure wasn't so terrifying after all. More like a friend who'd truly come to help him. Swoosh, swoosh. In a flash, the rest shot into midair, keeping their distance from him. Or more precisely, from the figure. Come down here, Kael wasn't satisfied. I brought a friend to meet you all. Is this how you receive guests? The group seethed, nearly cursing aloud. Guests, bullshit guests. Go. Chu Kuang hauled the trembling Yuan gang with him, eyes full of dread. He had once stood in the Saint Realm, but this figure still surpassed his understanding. Too terrifying. In truth, no warning was needed. Kael alone was already troublesome, and with a bizarre figure far more frightening trailing behind him, who would dare linger? Even Wu Han and Kai Jun had no thought left for hating Kael. They fled madly, cursing only their shallow cultivation and sluggish speed. Go. First hunted by these men, then shadowed by that figure, Kael had long been nursing a bellyful of anger. Why would he let them off easily? Stay. The long sword gave a soft tremor. An unparalleled beam of sword light flashed out, cleaving down the man at the rear. Still not enough to vent his rage. Clenching his jaw, Kael erupted his cultivation to the limit and gave chase. Outside another palace. Young Valley Master. A follower wore a face full of lingering fear and relief. Thank heavens, we made it out. Dai and exhaled, then sucked in a sharp breath. A wound, 3 feet long, lay across his torso, clearly visible, still seeping blood. Young Valley Master, a follower asked carefully, didn't you say that man was injured? Then why? Why is he still this fearsome? Diane the number, one genius of the heavenly demon valley, he had moved the Dao bell to ring 7 times, earning the great Dao's gift of the heavenly demon bloodline. His flesh was so mighty that even the Valley Master himself never stinted on praise. Yet he had still been wounded beneath Kael's sword. How would I know? Dai, Anne's face darkened. Could that bastard have been faking his injury, angling for prey? Pa, a treacherous creature. Little did he know that Kael's wounds were mainly to his soul, and divine sense the power of his sword. Light hadn't diminished half a point. At most, his aim had been slightly off. HMPH. At the memory of that figure, an involuntary shiver ran through him. Then a flicker of gloating followed. That figure gave me a very, very dangerous feeling. Now that he's been entangled by that thing, he's likely doomed. He broke off, head snapping up, brow furrowing deeply. Above, a dozen odd figures fled in a frenzy through the sky-soaring realm, streaking directly overhead without a single glance at him. He was bewildered. What's going on? Young Valley Master, the follower let out a shrill cry. Look over there. Run, run. Following his finger, Dai and's golden fur stood on end in an instant. In the distance, Kael sprinted at full tilt, a wild grin splitting his face. Chasing and being chased was far more fun than it had any right to be. Behind him, the shadow clung like a phantom. No matter how fast Kael ran, it held its distance at exactly 1 zhang. Not a hair closer, not a hair farther. Up ahead, Diane came into view. Kael bared his teeth in a grin by way of greeting. Holy shit, the scream tore out of Diane's throat. You goddamn persistent ghost, D, don't you come any closer. Beside the soul, nourishing lotus, the congealed emerald pill had done its heaven, defying work. Yana Murong's wounds, and those of her 2 companions, had closed completely. Not even a flicker of joy crossed their faces, only worry, cold and heavy. Alas, Yana Murong sighed. I wonder how Brother Gu is faring now. He should be all right. Ivan weighed the words before letting them out. We've all seen how fearsome that thing is. If it truly wished to harm him, it would have acted long ago. It wouldn't wait until now. Even as he spoke, his eyes betrayed him. He didn't believe a word of it. What do we do? Yana Murong looked distressed. Seems I really called it, didn't I? Brother Gu really has gotten tangled up with that thing. Shenzhen opened his mouth, then closed it. Junior sister, this place grows stranger by the hour. In the future, best to say as few such things as possible. Let's hope, Ivan murmured, gazing into the distance, that he comes back unscathed. Inside a crumbling hall, Kael communed with Shade in his consciousness space. An hour ago, he had chased Chukwang and his crew through these ruins. He'd struck with full force the entire way and cut down 3 more of them. But wiping out the rest wasn't realistic with his current strength. So he'd turned around and come back. The Mystic Elixir Pavilion was the priority. Besides, the chase had taught him a thing or two about the shadow. It didn't wound him, it didn't harm him, advance, retreat, or stand still. It kept exactly 1 zhang between them, no more, no less. It only followed. Curious, he'd asked Shade for his insight. The power of time. Shade's voice rang with utter conviction. That mist of light is unquestionably the power of time. The Tao of time towers above, and transcends every other Tao. Since antiquity, this lord has never once heard of anyone truly mastering it. A sliver of its power might linger in a few naturally formed perilous places, a handful of death realms, but here, in a place this small. He paused, then went on. Why would such power exist at all? Kael felt something click into place. No wonder, only time could summon a tender sprout from the soil, walk it through its entire life in the span of a heartbeat, and collapse it into a wisp of dust. The shadow. Kael said after a long moment, "What is it, exactly?" Shade gave the question some thought. They should be remnant thoughts. Remnant thoughts. Precisely, not even remnant souls. Mere lingering obsessions, a single thread of attachment, nothing more. How rare are they? Exceedingly. Shade inclined his head. Unless a living being dies with a wish so fierce it refuses to be buried, such a thing cannot survive. Even this lord has witnessed it only once or twice. He paused, then changed tack. But the great path of time is no ordinary road. Under the scouring of time's power, even an obsession should dissolve to nothing in an instant. Yet these shadows endure that erosion, and have even absorbed a sliver of its nature, that this lord has never seen until now. His awareness turned, through Kael's own senses, to the shadow outside. It is precisely because of that the time nature they have absorbed, that anyone who touches them turns to dust. These obsessions. Kael went quiet. How long have they been here? Judging by what you have told me, Shade shook his head. This place is by no means young. It could be 100,000 years. It could be 1,000,000 or longer. Kael fell silent. His mood sank like a stone. How long could a Saint Realm cultivator live? Nowhere near long enough. 1,000,000 years. What kind of obsession could withstand the ceaseless scouring of time, waiting 1,000,000 years for a single unfulfilled wish? And that wish, what could it possibly be? I'm rather curious myself. Shade shot him a sidelong glance. Why does it latch onto you of all people? Think you can fulfill its wish? Utter bullshit. A snot-nosed brat whose cultivation is so low, it makes cannon fodder look respectable, yet blessed with a first-rate talent for stirring up trouble. What good could anyone expect from the likes of you? You're a remnant soul now. Kael stared at him, then asked out of the blue, that doesn't count as dead, right? Of course not. Shade waved a hand. With this lord's cultivation, so long as my remnant soul endures, I am not truly dead. Should the chance ever arise. Got it. Kael cut him off flatly. If this remnant soul of yours is destroyed, that's real death, then. Obviously. So, Kael's eyes gleamed. If you died, would you leave behind an obsession? Goddamit, Shade exploded. Who the hell can say for sure? Want to give it a try? Shade suddenly had nothing to say. Kael withdrew with a victorious smile, like a man who had won a battle without lifting a finger. After he was gone, Shade was silent for a long time. At last he sighed, 1,000,000 years. A pitiable bunch, those. Outside, Kael slowly opened his eyes. 10 feet or so behind him, the shadow hovered in perfect silence. Kael found he no longer feared the figure. If anything, it seemed almost pitiable. What exactly are you waiting for? The shadow naturally said nothing. Kael let out a soft sigh. He had the distinct feeling that until its wish was fulfilled, this shadow would keep waiting. Another 1,000,000 years, 10,000,000, until the world itself crumbled to ruin. Don't tell me. He studied it for a long while. On a strange impulse, he asked, "You're waiting for me?" The shadow gave no reaction. Kael didn't mind. Shade had said these obsessions were devoid of thought and reason, carrying only a sliver of instinct. They would never respond to anything save their final unfinished wish. If it had spoken, that would have been the real cause for alarm. Come on, then. He smiled at himself and turned away. Time for the real work. Behind him, the shadow followed without a sound. By the soul, nourishing lotus, the 3 companions were still heavy with worry when Kael came into view. Joy swept across their faces, and they started forward until they saw the shadow hovering behind him. Their bodies locked, in unison, they stepped back. Brother Gu, Yana Murong blinked. What is going on? That thing, Shenzun's face had gone slightly pale. It hasn't left. More to the point, Ivan rubbed his chin, calmer than the other two. You look almost pleased. Kael's expression, in contrast, carried a relaxed ease, the complete opposite of the wary tension he'd worn when he left. Don't be afraid. Kael found the situation faintly amusing. Allow me to introduce you to a new friend. A friend? The three were utterly dumbfounded. Since when could you make friends with that asterisk? Learn something new every day. While they stood with jaws hanging, Kael gave them a condensed account of what he had learned. He chose his words with care. Anything involving shade was skimmed over in a single sentence. The more they heard, the deeper their silence grew. An obsession, a million years, the power of time itself. They had always known Kael harbored secrets, and they trusted his every word, which made the revelation all the more staggering. A half-step transcendence realm cultivator could expect a lifespan of 1,000 odd years at most. A million years, what kind of timescale was that? In truth, Kael hadn't told them the Mystic Elixir Pavilion might have stood for longer than 1,000,000 years. Otherwise, they would have shut down completely. Seeing that they hadn't recovered, Kael didn't press. He turned his attention to the soul, nourishing lotus. Within the withered yellow seed pod, the pale cyan seed looked more extraordinary than ever. Its fragrance swelled, thick and sweet, and the cultivation base he had been suppressing so carefully strained toward a breakthrough again. Priceless, his eyes gleamed. He moved to pluck it, then paused. What is this? Earlier, Chu Kuang and his crew had taken too much of his attention. Now he noticed it. At the very end of the lotus's root, half, buried beneath dust and loose sand, a faint translucence glimmered. Curious, he swept his sleeve across the ground, brushing the mess away to reveal the object beneath. A transparent crystal, the lotus's root strands were embedded directly into its surface. What he didn't see, the moment the crystal was unearthed, the shadow behind him stirred. Kael picked it up without hesitation, turning it over in his hands, palm-sized, rhomboid, flawless as glass. Strange patterns wove through its depths, clear to the naked eye. When he swept his divine sense across it, he caught a current of vitality, flowing within, so weak, it was nearly imperceptible. So, that's it. He finally understood why every other spiritual herb in these garden beds had long since crumbled to dust. Only the soul, nourishing lotus remained. This crystal had been sustaining it all along. Without spiritual energy to nourish it, vital force to sustain it, or wards to shield it, even a saint medicine would have withered away long ago. Yet here it was withered, drained, but unmistakably real. Another treasure, then. He reached his verdict in an instant. He had no idea what the crystal was, but anything capable of nurturing a saint medicine was no ordinary object. Without a second thought, he collected everything, the crystal, the withered seed pod, even the dried roots. A withered saint medicine was still a saint medicine. It might look dead, but what if it still held some use he couldn't imagine? If he let it slip through his fingers and regretted it later, he would never forgive himself. Let's go. He returned to the three, who were still lost in thought. Kael was mildly exasperated. Time for the real work. The real work? Yana Murong asked reflexively. What real work? Making a fortune. He pointed at the rows of palaces. Strike it rich. He was in desperate need of the soul, nourishing lotus, but he had no intention of keeping it all to himself. The three of them stood at the divine connection realm, in pressing need of strengthening their soul power. For them, this lotus was no less than a divine treasure. Of course, divvying up the spoils was still premature. After all, they had only scraped up a fraction of the Mystic Elixir Pavilion's pills. The layout of the Mystic Elixir Pavilion was hardly complex. Between the rows of palaces ran bluestone avenues roughly 10 feet wide. Though an unknown number of years had passed, that era's style was still visible, clean to an extreme. Ordered to an extreme, uniform to an extreme. All extravagance had been discarded in favor of pure function. On one such avenue, Zhao Mengyou's party was scanning for palaces that remained well preserved. No one was a fool. What occurred to Kael occurred to everyone else as well. The more intact the palace, the more potency its pills would retain. Divine Maiden, a female follower ventured that figure. What exactly is it? I don't know. Zhao Mengyou could not suppress a shudder. Whatever it is, it gives me a very dangerous feeling. Are we abandoning that treasure? Yes, Zhao Mengyou shook her head. That thing is valuable, but the risk is too great to stake our lives. Besides, the Mystic Elixir Pavilion is vast. This is hardly the only stroke of fortune to be found. If we search diligently, our yield won't be small. HMPH, a male follower, was indignant. That goo fellow, Divine Maiden, clearly helped him before, and instead of gratitude, he's sickening. Enough. Zhao Mengyou's face was bland, impossible to read. Once he's tangled up with that thing, I'm afraid he's done for. Now, we SH. Divine Maiden, before she could finish, a follower pointed toward a nearby palace and called out in joy. That palace is fully intact. What we want is bound to be inside. Good, pleasure stirred in Zhao Mengyou's heart. Let's go in and... Her voice died, her face stiffened. Not far off, 4, no, to be precise, 5 figures were striding toward the same palace. Who else but Kael? Oh, evidently Kael had spotted her too. Divine Maiden Zhao, what a coincidence. With his speed, that short distance was crossed in an instant. Tusk, he flickered and appeared in front of Zhao Mengyou's party, grinning wide. Fate certainly keeps throwing us together. He was smiling, but there was nothing kind about it. The motionless, ghostly figure behind him made that smile even more unsettling. Zhao Mengyou took 2 involuntary steps back. What do you want now? This she had not foreseen. Not only was Kael alive, he seemed to be coexisting with that apparition. Nothing, Kael beamed. We have some friendship between us, don't we? I've gotten to know a new friend recently. Perfect timing to make an introduction. Friend. Zhao Mengyou's frame trembled. Her face paled again. She was sure Kael meant her no good. Sure enough. Come, Kael looked over his shoulder at the figure. This is Divine Maiden Zhao. Tusk. 7 tolls of the Dao Bell, born with a face to topple cities. A first-rate beauty, no question. Aren't you going to say hello? As he spoke, he took another 2 steps toward Zhao Mengyou. That eerie smile, those malicious eyes, and the figure that was now drifting slowly toward her, Zhao Mengyou's composure shattered on the spot. Plain as day, a fine layer of goosebumps broke out on her pale, flawless neck. Her voice cracked. Don't come any closer. Whoosh! Every shred of reserve abandoned, she shot skyward as a streak of purple light and fled again. Goo, you bastard. Her voice was panicked, helpless, and tinged with a thread of resentment. Brother Goo, Nero's shanks was at a loss for words. You. He thought Kael could be a real piece of work. Tusk. Yana Murong, meanwhile, stared fixedly at the figure. A living being leaves behind a stubborn obsession after death. This old lady's never heard of such a thing. Even that Divine Maiden ran away from it twice, truly mighty. After all the shocks they had just been through, she no longer found the figure frightening. If anything, she was curious, eager to edge closer for a better look. Don't, Kael almost jumped. Don't touch it. The figure showed him no ill will, but it had no awareness of its own. Kael had no way of knowing whether it could tell friend from foe. If it could not, approaching it rashly would be suicide. Yana Murong took 2 sheepish steps back. I'm just curious. The other 3 were rendered wordless. Curious, that wasn't curiosity, that was a death wish. Chu Kuang couldn't have seen this coming, even remarked with some feeling that they would take such a tumble at your hands. A real pity. Kael did sound regretful. If they hadn't fled so fast, I could have buried every last one of them. Ah well. He glanced at the palace. That score will be settled sooner or later. For now, let's go in and see what's inside. Inside the palace, ruin reigned as before. Only the wooden shelf lined with pill bottles had been covered with a restriction, one that shimmered with a faint radiance. Beneath the restriction, rows of pill bottles sat in perfect order. Soul Cleansing Pill cleanses and refines the soul. When taken by cultivators at the Earth Tribulation Realm, it purifies impurities within soul power. Soul Nourishing Pill replenishes and fortifies the soul. When taken by cultivators at the Earth Tribulation Realm, it increases soul power by 1/10. Soul Condensing Pill consolidates the soul. When taken by cultivators at the Earth Tribulation Realm, it shortens the duration of Earth Tribulation. Kael looked once, then could not look away. Nor was he the only one. The other 3 also wore expressions of wild joy. Every single one of these pills was related to the soul. These pills could be used by Earth Tribulation Realm cultivators. Divine Connection Realm cultivators, naturally, could use them too. And most importantly, so could Folly. Well. Yana Murong was grinning ear to ear. How many years of bitter toil will these pills save this old lady? Raising soul power was, of course, exceedingly difficult. Her earlier rapid break through to the 3rd layer of the Divine Passage Realm had come about not merely because of her many years of accumulated cultivation. The Divine Quintessence had played no small part. If she had relied only on her own slow, grinding effort, without the aid of external medicines, the climb from the 3rd layer to the 9th layer of the divine passage realm would have consumed no short amount of time. Restoring wounds, Kael said, his tone complicated, enhancing soul power, raising cultivation. Just how many kinds of pills we've never heard of are hidden in this mystic elixir pavilion. Once the initial elation passed, Ivan's brow furrowed once more. This restriction, it won't be easy to break. It was far stronger than the one they had encountered earlier. Perfect, Kael smiled. That just proves these pills were preserved impeccably. Earlier, when he had broken through the other restriction, roughly a third of the several hundred bottles of elixirs still retained their potency. Given the strength of the restriction here, he was certain at least half of them were still usable. Probably. He pondered for a moment, and a rough estimate took shape in his mind. I'll need 2 hours. With that, he stopped, hesitating. Following the restriction, breaking technique Shade had taught him, his hands flew without pause, shaping one complex, arcane hand seal after another until they nearly blurred into afterimages. Brother, Yana Murong's flustered voice cut through the silence. It moved. Moved? It moved. What? Kael glanced back instinctively and froze. The figure that had shown no sign of life, no matter what he tried, was now interlacing its hands and forming one hand seal after another. Kael swallowed. What is it doing? It looks like, Ivan's tone was impossible to read. It's learning how you break restrictions. Learning from me, and it actually moved. The 2 questions flooded Kael's mind, crowding out everything else. But his hands had stopped, the figure's had not. Its hand seals bore no resemblance to Kael's. They were far, far simpler. It finished the sequence in a matter of moments, yet showed not the slightest intention of stopping. Instead, it simply started again. This, Nero's Shanks stared, utterly bewildered. What on earth is it doing? No way Yana Murong blinked. It's not after these elixirs too, is it? It's just a lingering obsession. What would it want with pills? That offhand remark instantly brought Shade's words back to Kael. Obsession, a wish. Could it be its wish had something to do with these elixirs? He studied the figure's movements closely and immediately noticed the anomaly in its hand seals. What it was using was actually the correct dispelling technique. This figure wasn't breaking the restriction, it was unlocking it. I understand, Kael let out a soft sigh. This had to be the lingering obsession of someone who once belonged to the mystic elixir pavilion. Of course, it knew the proper way to undo the seal. It had probably woven it in the first place. But now it was nothing more than a wisp of longing, stripped of every shred of cultivation. It didn't matter how perfectly it remembered the technique. The restriction was beyond its reach. He stared at the phantom, his expression caught between pity and confusion. Want these elixirs. It made no sense. Had this obsession endured all those bitter years, waiting in silence, only to reach for a few bottles of pills? No vengeance, no unfinished masterpiece, just medicine. The figure said nothing, its hands kept moving. Very well, Kael shook his head, the weight of it settling in his chest. I'll help you. The hand seals it formed were hardly profound. If anything, they were laughably simple. He'd memorized them with a single glance, and replicating them came just as easily. Breaking a restriction was always dozens of times harder than dispelling one. Even Shade's best technique demanded 10 times the effort and energy of a proper unraveling. But with the correct method in hand, it was almost embarrassing how easy this became. Within a few breaths, the barrier around the wooden shelf flickered once, then silently, completely dissolved. The phantom lowered its hands and returned to its earlier stillness, as if nothing had happened. Have a look. On any other day, with this many soul power-replenishing elixirs waiting in front of him, Kael would have swept them all up without a second thought. But he didn't. Instead, he turned his gaze to the figure, waiting for it to make the first move.